If you've spent enough time in Namibia, you do not require statistics to understand that we are an exceedingly unequal society. Inequality, for the purpose of this discussion or my lecture, implies the unequal or unjust distribution of life-enhancing goods and opportunities, which hinder human beings, both as individuals and as members of groups, from attaining conditions of life that are more humane in some meaningful way. Now, while I do not intend to paint a grim picture, I would remiss in my recommendations without providing you a glimpse of the extent of inequality in Namibia. Despite being categorized as a middle-income country, Namibia ranks as one of the nations with the highest inequality globally. Inequality goes beyond the lack of economic resources. It also obstructs access to life-enhancing services such as education, clean water, housing, health, safety, transportation, information and communication technology, etc. So majority of Namibians cannot access these goods or services due to their economic conditions. Now, much of this background of inequality is inherited. It's also systemic and also structural. The aim of my lecture tonight, which is very brief, which I've got about 10-15 minutes, is to shift this discussion of inequality into the realm of ethics. Because quite often we ask all the technical questions, but rarely do we ask the human question. Because when we speak about inequality, we're not just speaking about just numbers. We're talking about real human beings who are affected. So my underlying assertion tonight is that inequality in a developing country like ours or developing society like ours is neither economic, political, nor technological, but moral. And I'm quoting Dennis Goulet, late Dennis Goulet, from his book, A Cruel Choice, that poor people often have to make very, very cruel choices in order to survive. To address this would require advocating for a moral vision that must encompass all structures and segments of society, particularly the state's machinery. With the hope that such a vision, or a moral vision, will motivate entities entrusted with enacting policies and programs that will first of all reduce vulnerability. Vulnerability in this case refers to exposure to elements which individuals have no control. Vulnerability resulting from vulnerability resulting from inequality breeds powerlessness and hopelessness, which manifest as the primary condition for the majority of Namibians. Now, when you think about powerlessness and hopelessness, it comes to such an extent where the powerless and the hopeless begin to admire those very people and systems that actually oppress them, because they think that's the norm, to a point where they even spiritualize it and see that this is the will of the gods or the ancestors. This must be destiny. This majority often presents as the low income, the unemployed, marginalized, unskilled, and impoverished individuals who lack the means to achieve their aspirations, in contrast to a small minority of extremely wealthy individuals who control socioeconomic resources. Secondly, such a moral vision should be able to inspire, to affect the lack of choice, which hampers individual well-being, self-esteem, and even liberty. What lack of choice does is that it robs you from living a life of dignity. To make meaningful choices, people need adequate resources, be they financial or social resources, and opportunities to make practical decisions that can ensure an acceptable standard of living. Now, Isaiah Berlin at one point writes, and he says that if a human being, a man, cannot afford common goods to which there is no legal ban, such a person is not free. For a good such as bread or water, where there are no laws saying that you may not buy bread or may not purchase water, if you can't access these goods, Berlin argues, you are not free. And that is what a cruel choice makes you do. The inability to choose contributes to increased vulnerability, to dehumanizing conditions such as even when we think about gender-based violence, where women have to stay in abusive relationships just for purposes of survival, and even sexual exploitation, labor exploitation. You stay in a job where you simply need to survive even if you are being abused in that job. Therefore, the absence of freedom of choice leads to making harsh decisions, even to one's own detriment. If liberty, for us as Namibians, is a value held so highly that it is included in our code or even national code of arms, we must reassess its full meaning to eliminate all constraints that hinder experiencing a good life. Now, I appreciate that we have liberty as a value, but we've got one useless value which cannot be assessed, and we can never even tell whether we have achieved it, and that is unity. Why do we have such a value which we can never measure in 30 years' time? Even if we achieve it, what good does it really produce? Is it that we have set ourselves up, as Chinua Achebe asked the Nigerian question, that do our leaders choose these kind of cheap values so that they will never be held accountable? But liberty is a value. But how does it display to show that people are truly living a life in which they experience the good life? By centering this discussion on these two aspects of vulnerability and lack of choice, we can confer a deeper historical or socio-historical and contextual significance to inequality. Thus, all developmental efforts must be aimed at improving human conditions and must be responsive to contextual realities. Therefore, when we think about technological advancements, fiscal policies, national planning goals, economic structures, and social programs that operate in a socio-historical vacuum, such policies only reinforce inequality and poverty. At present, we have witnessed significant infrastructural modernization in Namibia, or at least in Windhoek. We have also seen fiscal policies, beautiful ones, social policies also. However, these have not effectively shielded the majority of citizens from diverse socioeconomic vulnerabilities. If anything, despite efforts since gaining independence, socioeconomic inequality has grown exponentially. To date, I have yet to encounter a government development policy program or a policy and program that places the normative and human question at its core or as its driving force, which is, what are the prerequisites for a good life and a good society? My response to this, let me put it in a dialectical form. If vulnerability defines existence for the majority of Namibians, then systems, structures, policies, and programs aimed at improving socioeconomic conditions must themselves become vulnerable. They need to establish a reciprocal relationship with the vulnerable majority that suffers from structurally imposed inequality. This suggests that inequality is not a necessary evil, as some of us would like to think, especially if you come from a Weberian perspective, or even the Kasnet hypothesis, or the Weberian invisible hand of self-correcting markets. Well, inequality is man-made. It's not natural. It's an issue of power distribution. So for anyone to think that, well, somehow if we allow the system to grow, inequality will go up, and eventually when it has reached its peak, it will naturally drop, that's not going to happen. Because it has become increasingly evident that both the theory, the Kasnet hypothesis and the Weberian theory, both of these theories, only benefit a small minority, as evidenced by growing mass poverty globally, and even here in Namibia we see it, and stark inequality, which challenge any remaining legitimacy of the Weberian analysis. This vulnerability, I believe, would contribute to realizing, this vulnerability, if the systems themselves were to become vulnerable, would contribute to some sort of a good life and a good society by at least doing the following. So if we think about making the systems vulnerable, what must be done? One, I personally think imposing austerity on the wealthy. That means making the wealthy vulnerable. Not by taking away their assets, but we have spoken a lot about progressive taxation. That is so that the wealthy themselves would feel the pinch of the society in which they find themselves. And especially the wealthy as a result of the historical background of colonialism and apartheid and inherited wealth structures. The existing structures that protect the wealthy or the rich must be rendered vulnerable, allowing those who experience vulnerability as a default condition to succeed in their own socioeconomic circumstances. Thus, the current socioeconomic policies of a mixed economy, I believe, are flawed and insufficient in distributing symbols of a good life. What are the symbols that when we look at them in Namibia, we say these symbols represent a good life? Our current structures able to distribute those symbols. And I think the neocolonial structures that we continue to use are not replicable. And that is within the system itself. And only when such structures are made vulnerable will there be some sort of a form of distribution in order for people at the margins of society will be able to experience some sort of the benefits and experience the good life. Secondly, this vulnerability must cultivate a critical consciousness or conscience that fully acknowledges the historical roots of the socioeconomic inequality, the historical roots of socioeconomic inequality, to propose solutions aligned with justice, that we can no longer just adopt systems from somewhere that do not speak to our context. And I think that is the burden upon us, Namibian academics, that we can no longer just replicate systems and ideas if they do not speak to the context anymore. And I think the government and every one of us, we are responsible for that. How do we make systems speak to the here and now, to the realities of Namibia? Achieving a good life entails pursuing solutions tailored to each context. Thus, addressing inequality requires rational policies that respond to society's needs. Now, how should this be addressed? How should this be addressed? Given that the majority of Namibians lack the ability to choose the kind of life that they desire, I think the state, assuming that such a state is ethical, just, and effective, must intervene to empower people to act in ways they would if they were fully informed or at their best. Especially in a context where the current circumstances in which we find ourselves have been shaped by state intervention, be it the colonial state or the apartheid state. To undo that violence, there must be state interventions in the here and now. To confer, especially where there's been the history of state intervention to confer generational advantages to a select few. The call for the state to rectify socioeconomic inequality is grounded in the belief that it operates institutions that embody our best and wisest selves. That's what the state does. When it selects the most capable, the wisest and best of us as representatives, therefore such a state must then come up with policies and programs and structures to be able to address these levels of inequality and poverty. Because we are made to believe that people who are making the decisions and writing the policies are representatives of our best selves and the wisest of society. Thus, to effectively counter arrangements that prevent certain individuals, this sentence is a bit complex, let me try to go a little bit slow so that you also get it. To effectively counter arrangements that prevent certain individuals from possessing the symbols needed for a good life and prevent them from falling into further coerced living conditions, these institutions of the state that embody our best and wisest selves must intervene. This is where the state requires the development of policies and programs to address inequality. National budgets must be infused with a vision of mitigating inequality and not be used as political tools to suppress differing voices. The availability of the resources, however limited they are, must be deployed to shield the most vulnerable among us and their descendants. I think somebody said that you know the kind of society in which you find yourself by how that society treats its most vulnerable. And I think the current circumstances tell us that somehow we are a misplaced society because the most vulnerable among us are not protected. Be they people from marginalized communities, women and children, the unemployed, the poor, and all that. As I end, I would like to say that we need to witness more efforts aimed at combating inequality rather than perpetuating it, especially where the state should not create policies that perpetuate inequality. In fact, those policies must be geared towards undoing inequality. The policing of inequality needs to come to an end, and therefore it becomes an ethical dialogue, that there are real human beings who are affected. The week of equality is not just a theory, it's not just an abstract, but real people that we want, whose lives we want bettered. People who are crying out there. And what are we doing as Namibians? And I'm sure there are the best and the wisest of some of us gathered here tonight. That's a moral obligation that we must take on and hold ourselves accountable, and so also hold our decision makers accountable. And not by simply blaming government, but every one of us needs to do their part in contributing to making this a better society. Thank you.